So before I kind of dwell into, what our services are and what we offer to, customers like yourself, I thought it's kind of pertinent for me to quickly lay down some context in terms of the overall evolution that the business intelligence and analytics space has seen over the past couple of decades, if not, years. So the face has really changed, as we've all seen around new things like in-memory computing, analytics, big data. So this particular, aspect of the business has seen a tremendous change over the last few years. So, if you look at two big axes, let's say the complexity of analysis and the complexity of technology enablement. Let's try and see with the time axis, how have these things changed over the last few years. So if you see the first era, which I call the 95 to 2005, mid 90s to mid 2000s, what's happened is that your complexity of analysis, which is the blue boxes, has gone up. So you started with some basic MIS reports getting churned out of your ERP systems, and you were just seeing those big 15-page reports where you could kind of highlight stuff. It moved on to some ad hoc reports which you could pull out when you wanted to from the system. Then moved out to query reporting. You started asking questions to the system. So that was the evolution that we saw. This is the age when business objects and some of those new tools were kind of picking up speed. Whereas if you look at the green boxes, which is the complexity of technology enablement, that's gone down. So you had traditional technology initially, and in the mid 2000s you started seeing appliances where you had preloaded software, configured specifically, hardware configured specifically to give fine performance to that software. So the complexity was coming down. And at that point of time, you only had a single source of data. So you had your enterprise apps, you had data warehouses, you had an OLAP system at best. The format, which is barely visible, is the CSV and kind of tabular format. Technology was standard RDBMS, data warehouse, conventional memory and processing. So let's take a step ahead. What happened after that? So while this part, the 95s to mid 2000 was helping you to understand what has happened in the past, as Raman mentioned, having you look at the rear view mirror. What has happened? So this event has already happened. How did my sales go? What customers did I book my revenue with, et cetera, et cetera. The second phase was about predicting what is going to happen. And if you look at the blue boxes, the complexity of analysis increased further. So now you were doing statistical analysis, you were doing forecasting, you were trying to predict things. And your sources of data went from being single to multi. So now you had multiple, enterprise solutions. You had a procurement solution, you had a, overall enterprise solution, you had a CRM system, you had your own, custom apps, and the mess started, happening as technologies matured. Finally, as we, look at things today we're talking about not just what is going to happen in terms of predicting things, but prescribing things, which is all about optimization and getting big insights, which one of my, previous colleague was just mentioning in the presentation. So the analysis has gone up. The simplification has gone down. So you get BI SaaS, you get in-memory appliances, you get technology, you get software all in one place. So while the analysis is becoming more and more complex, the technology providers are trying to simplify the enablement more and more. And if you look at the data sources, which started as being single, then to multi-internal, now are multi-internal external, because now you're pulling in data from the Facebooks, the LinkedIns, the websites, the blogs, the YouTubes of the world. So it's kind of, all over the place. So that makes it, very interesting. And let me give you an example, in terms of what I mean by past, future, and, kind of prescriptive. So yesterday, when I was kind of trying to figure out the past, I was seeing what were my inventory levels last month. When I moved to predictive, I was trying to ask what would be my inventory levels if I looked at the history. I was trying to predict if my inventory levels were this much in March, what are they going to be in, let's say, the next couple of quarters. Now, I'm trying to figure out what should be my inventory levels taking into consideration various variables like demand, like the market conditions, and so on and so forth. So my analytics is actually telling me that, hey, this particular season is coming, this is the way the market is going, so you stock this product. So this is what we've evolved around. From an India market context, we have this discussion all the time, right? That this is more of a Western trend, and social media and internet is more pervasive in the Western world, and how much is it relevant to the Indian market? So, a couple of very interesting data points, which kind of substantiate the fact that this is becoming very relevant to the Indian market as we speak. First of all, I'm sure a lot of you already know, but India is the third largest internet user base in the world after China and the US. And almost a majority of this data is coming out of internet. The penetration is just 13%. So just imagine, we're already number 3. The penetration is 13%. Just imagine what's going to happen in 3 years' time. So consulting firms like BCG predict that the internet users are going to almost triple over the next 3 years. So it's a data gold mine sitting out there. The number of mobile handsets, the penetration, and there are varied numbers because all of us have this habit of using multiple SIM cards. So it kind of becomes difficult on establishing the unique number of mobile phones, but a conservative estimate suggests there are around 25 to 30% of the entire population. An interesting trivia on the lighter side that I was reading the other day is that in our country, there are more mobile phones than toothbrushes. So something as basic as toothbrush, the mobile phone has outstripped that. If you go to the villages, you talk to the grocery guy, everyone has got a mobile set. And if you believe that it's not a potential customer, it's going to change pretty soon, because I was just reading this article the other day where Facebook sent a group of 10 engineers who are into product design to tier 3 cities in India and rural areas in India, and they bought all those, $3,000 to $5,000 smartphones or simple phones, interviewed people in the rural areas and say, hey, how do you use your phone? And the challenge to them is, how do we bring them to Facebook? So the world is, going to come out rapidly, even as our country is concerned. So I just want to kind of bring the context that this is a real, opportunity out there for our country as well. Sometimes kind of gets into debate. Okay. So what that does is, you've got data, you've got mobile, and all of that stuff happening. What does that do? What does that mean to you as business intelligence practice owners or designers or architects? So in the previous scenarios, when things were pretty simple, data was structured, all of that stuff, this is the architecture that you had. So you had structured data, you had an ETL engine, and you were pulling it into traditional systems like enterprise data warehouses, MDM, operational data stores, and so on and so forth. Now what's happened is you've got unstructured data. So you've got to pull it in a very different way. You've got to have an ETL engine out there and pull it into systems that are fairly new and evolving. Like the Hadoops of the world, the NoSQL, the other NoSQL, the database schema is different, the technologies are different, it runs on MPP, and all of that stuff. And most importantly, these two systems need to talk. Otherwise, it's very difficult for you to get business value out of it. I'll give you a very interesting example that I was reading, and these people sensationalize it, but I'm just going to give you an example to bring about the point, why is it important to have that, communication between these two things. So, this is an example in the US where one of the frequent travelers tweeted on his mobile phone saying that, hey, whenever I get to this airport, I have a 3 hours waiting period, and I always have food from this particular retail outlet. But this time, my layover is just 1 hour, so I'm going to miss the food, and he put a bad smiley out there, kind of telling that how sad he was about missing it. So this retail company caught that tweet, linked it with their MDM system, figured out who this customer was, and as soon as he landed on the airport, they had a bag of that food waiting for him. That's differentiation. You've sold it. It's not just technology. And it's not about just about that particular customer. And when you create an article that gets published in Economic Times and WSJ, you're winning customers. So that's the business aspect of why this modern architecture is necessary and why do these two things need to talk to each other. Okay. So, coming to the topic of the day, I just wanted to kind of set the context and then get into it. So, what are the keys of modernization? We talked about the modern architecture, we talked about need of modern architecture. So, as we see it, we have a pretty unique advantage of practicing what we preach. So, we've done all of this for ourselves. We're a $60 billion plus company, and we had our own set of problems as far as this was concerned, and we are very market-facing in terms of our internet usage and our Dell platform. So we've done a lot of these things, and I'm going to talk about our own case study later on. But the three key pillars of modernization are people, process, and technology. So it's not entirely a technology play. It's not, it's a little bit of a consulting, advisory, as well as change management play. From a people perspective, you need to have executive sponsors because of very tight integration with the business. They should be bought into it. You've got to have the right kind of people who have the right kind of skill set. You need data scientists, you need business analysts to really extract value out of it. The second part of it is around processes. You've got to have the right governance. You need custodians. You need stewards, and that needs to be in place. You've got to have the right kind of documentation, right kind of process flows, and so on and so forth. Technology, we've obviously talked about it. It ranges from simplifying your infrastructure to kind of moving to a centralized stuff, having big data engines, leveraging cloud and mobile, and all of that stuff that I'm sure you guys see day in and day out. So a lot of times we have this conversation with the customer that the ROI is not tangible. It's very difficult to figure out if it's really helping my business. And that's, kind of true to an extent. It kind of becomes challenging, but if you've got a clear roadmap, a clear strategy, and clear KPIs, it really does, kind of help you to measure the overall impact. And we just picked out a survey that we saw in the marketplace, who kind of modernized, for customers who modernized their BI infrastructure. So, these are some of the results. So, what did that lead to? Increased use of business intelligence. 74% of them said that. So the user adoption grew. User satisfaction grew. 48% or close to half of them agreed to that. Decision-making speed improved. Staff costs reduced because you were consolidating a lot. If you had a huge, organization all over the place, when you consolidate, it helps the cost. Decrease the software costs again because of consolidation. And finally, better understanding of the value of the BI. So there are some proof points around the fact that this is really beneficial. So this is a very busy slide, a lot of data out there. I'm not going to spend a ton of time there, but if you look at it, some of this is not visible. So competency, capability, and technology is really people, process, technology. And you've got to look at all the three. It's not just enough to put a big data engine out there. It's not just enough to hire 3 data scientists and get the work done. You've got to first create that foundation, and then take a step ahead. From a competency perspective, a customer or a company could be at any of these stages. You could be just starting off where you are cost center. You could be, at the second stage where you have informed executives, to the last stage where you're really driving the business and finally driving the market. You're being game changers in the marketplace. And then there are obviously capabilities which talk about, which is really the process part of it, having the right kind of custodians, having the right kind of data stewards. So you need to know, there has to be someone who takes care of the quality of the data, of the sanctity of the data, and the correctness of the data. If your data is not correct, and if someone is not managing that, all of this is, kind of sunk cost, really. Okay. So, just to provide a perspective in terms of when should you be talking about BI and analytics modernization, and we use the term modernization in a little bit of a fuzzy way. You might not necessarily be having a legacy or an old BI system and you want to migrate to it. You might be just starting afresh, which is what it says that if you don't know where to start, you know that you have to do something about BI and analytics. The business guys are saying that, hey, we need to look at BI&A also as business differentiator. But if you don't know where to start, this is an answer to it. If you're already underway and you want someone to come and validate your strategy, am I heading in the right direction? Do I need a course correction? You've seen this in 100 companies. Why don't you come and tell me, whether you think it's going to make sense for me in the longer term? If you're struggling with adoption, you've done all what you had to, but people are not really using the system, which is such a common problem, when you make investments and you don't see high user adoption. So we could come, assess your current state, implement and align your business partners with the overall strategy that you carry. And finally, you've done everything, but you're looking to maximize value. You just want a sounding board who you can talk to and figure out if there's anything more that you could potentially do. So we've got customers in all 4 spectrums: someone who's starting, someone who's already doing something, someone who's struggling with adoption, and someone who's done a lot but wants to make sure that they're doing the best that they can. Specifically, how can we help? So what we did was we said let's kind of list down the different elements of the functional team that you need and kind of highlight what relates with modernization. So if you look at solution architecture, if you've got a complex system, let's say you already have a system and it's evolved over the last 10 years. So a lot of times what we've seen is that systems are disparate. Some people are still using Excel and Access. They have the database in Access and they're pulling out data in Excel. Whereas the other guy likes to use the other system. The marketing function has bought another software. So it's very heterogeneous. We can come and try to make it centralized, homogeneous for you. Add the big data, the analytics component to it. Make sure that your old, BI architecture, which was standard ODS, is kind of appended with the new big data architecture and, kind of talking to each other. We could help you with the processes around data governance. What are the best practices as it relates to custodianship, stewardship? How should you create an MDM strategy? How should you create the process flows to make sure that you're getting one version of the truth and not, data that's all over the place? We obviously do data integration, and as a BI services organization, we are pretty full service in nature, and we could do anything, but it's not highlighted in green because it necessarily does not, relate with modernization. But once we've modernized, we can always help you with all these services as well. And then, finally, analytics development. We've got a pretty strong analytics team. We've got several data scientists on board, a few hundred, in fact. And we do a lot of work there in terms of understanding your industry, getting data, analyzing it, and providing you business insights. And we've got several, industry-specific solutions and industry-specific artifacts that we've built over the years and kind of leverage our own knowledge as well. Okay, so this is probably the last slide before I kind of get into the case study. So I'm trying to make it short and interesting in the interest of time. So the service offering is really called BI RAMP, which is Reporting and Analytics Modernization Program. So we could, as I said, we could come and do assessments for you, on any of those 4 stages that I talked about. How should you move to the big data analytics world? What kind of architectural changes do you need? If your BI adoption is not high, what should you do, and so on and so forth. If your architecture is complex, we can come and simplify it. So that entire bit of it. We could do POCs for that, around advanced reporting and analytics, stewardship. Just kind of pick a small piece and work with you to kind of prove the merit of this idea. And this is something that we do a lot with our customers because there's this initial hurdle of establishing ROI. So this is a key service area. And finally, obviously help you implement. So we can help you walk the talk if we kind of lay down a roadmap for you in terms of the strategy, the governance, and all of that stuff. We will work with you to implement it as well. So it's not that we just give advice, tell you how to do it, and then kind of walk off. And finally, the advisory services, which could be building a center of excellence and ongoing transformational activities. Okay, so let me quickly run through some case studies here. This is what I was briefly alluding to in my first slide. This is our case study. This is what we did at ourselves, and we like to kind of talk about this because just to give a perspective that we've gone through the same challenges and we can really kind of relate to what our customers face. So I'll just quickly run through it as some key hard-hitting data points. So we had around 2,500 business-owned customers support systems. So people using different systems on their own, which we didn't know about. When we did the entire of this exercise, we rationalized the CS environment and established a co-development model for business intelligence. And we reduced the TCO by over 40%. This is a logistics company. I'll just pick out a data point. So when we went there, based on our investigation, we rationalized 50 plus reporting teams. There were 50 plus reporting teams that were sitting in this organization to 4 regional and 1 enterprise enabling data enterprise and stewardship and governance. So 50 teams to 4 teams. That leads to a lot of consolidation, cost saving that I was talking about in terms of people cost, in terms of software cost, and so on. Insurance, again, similar stuff, so I'll kind of skip through it. Financial services, so this is an interesting one. This is one of the largest voice and electronic interdealer brokers. So huge amount of data in the system, excess of 2 trillion, covering more than 50 countries. And they were using multiple systems for the day-to-day processing. I can kind of keep going and on and on. We do a lot for our customers, and this is really helps us establish the real value of BI&A systems before kind of approaching it in a sporadic way where you do this and then the other day you do something else, and they're not necessarily tied together. So that's really our service offering from that perspective. So that's it. Thank you so much.